She went in for surgery and came out with a secret growing inside her. Her life changed overnight, but she had no idea how or why. What if your worst nightmare happened in the one place meant to protect you? Sabina sat frozen on the edge of her bed, eyes locked on two faint pink lines. Her fingers shook as she clutched the test. The box said 5 minutes, but the result appeared in seconds. Her mind refused to accept it. This is wrong. This can't be. She hadn't been with anyone, not in months, not since the minor abdominal surgery she'd undergone at St. Luke's Medical Center, Harare's most respected private hospital, and her husband, Justice Lionel Zachariah, a high court judge known across Zimbabwe, was sterile. They'd lived with that private sorrow for 6 years. So where had this pregnancy come from? She rushed to the ensuite, dropped onto the toilet lid and tried to steady her breathing. The white tile walls, the calm silence of the house, they felt like a cruel joke now. Her thoughts spun like a whirlwind. She called her personal doctor the next morning. "I need a blood test," she said, her voice dry. "I think I'm pregnant, but I can't be." The doctor told her to come in right away. 2 hours later, after running tests at the clinic, he sat across from her and confirmed it. She was 8 weeks along. Sabina's world shattered. When she told Lionel that evening, he didn't speak at first. He just stared at her, jaw clenched, like he was trying to make sense of a verdict that didn't fit the evidence. "You cheated," he finally said, voice cold and flat. "No," she whispered, tears in her throat. "Lionel, I swear I didn't." He rose from the chair. "Don't lie to me, Sabina. I can't have children. And now you're carrying someone else's baby." She tried to reach for him, but he stepped back. "I can't look at you right now." He walked out of the house that night. Sabina curled into herself and sobbed until her ribs hurt. She couldn't understand what had happened to her, or how. She tried to force her mind to retrace everything. Where had it happened? When? How? Who? She searched every corner of her memory for something, anything that made sense. But her mind gave her nothing, only silence and confusion. "Am I losing my mind?" she whispered to herself. Was it a dream? Had she imagined the whole thing? Or worse, had something happened to her while she was unconscious and she just didn't know? The questions crushed her. She didn't eat for days, couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling until her eyes burned, her body numb, her thoughts spinning in circles. Her world had collapsed overnight. Everything felt distant. Her home, her marriage, her own body. She stopped answering calls, stopped opening the curtains. The woman she used to be was gone. All that remained was a blank, aching mind, and a life growing inside her that she didn't understand. But Sabina wasn't alone. As the days crawled by, more voices began to rise, soft at first, like whispers in the dark, then louder, more urgent, more afraid. Women from different corners of Harare began coming forward with stories that mirrored hers in disturbing detail. Catherine, a newlywed teacher from Avondale, had gone in for a laparoscopic procedure after mild stomach pain. 2 weeks later, her doctor told her she was pregnant. Her husband broke down in tears. He had only just returned from a work assignment in Namibia. Memory, a 41-year-old widow from Mbare, went in for a routine scan after a dizzy spell. She was discharged with no issues. A month later, her clothes stopped fitting, her appetite changed, and her tests came back positive. She hadn't touched another man since her husband's funeral 3 years before. Helen, a university student in her final year, had undergone minor surgery for a cyst. Sedated overnight, she woke up feeling groggy but thought nothing of it until her period didn't come the next month. Then the test. Then the tears. Each woman denied being sexually active. Each had been sedated at St. Luke's Medical Center. Each now carried something inside them they couldn't explain and didn't ask for. Their pain echoed Sabina's. Their fear. Her fear. One by one, the puzzle pieces began to fall into place, not just for the women, but for the city watching in disbelief. Something was deeply wrong inside the walls of Harare's most trusted hospital, and the more stories that surfaced, the clearer it became. This wasn't coincidence. This was calculated. The whispers didn't stay whispers for long. They grew louder, spilling into group chats, radio call-ins, Facebook posts, and soon they became headlines. Harare women say they were violated while sedated. Trusted hospital under fire, people demanded answers. And the once untouchable reputation of St. Luke's Medical Center began to crack. In the background, one name kept surfacing, a name whispered more than spoken, but repeated often enough to stir suspicion. Dr. Stephen Ndlovu, a brilliant surgeon, handsome, charismatic, known for his sharp suits, expensive cologne, and disarming charm. Patients adored him. Nurses noticed him. He was smooth-spoken, quick to smile, and always had a compliment on hand. But some said he was too charming. He flirts with everyone, wrote a junior nurse anonymously. He touched my lower back once, said another. Said it was nothing, but it didn't feel that way. No one had ever filed an official complaint, but now, with the scandal exploding, no one cared about reports or proof. The public didn't need evidence. They needed someone to blame, and Dr. Stephen, with his perfect teeth and easy confidence, fit the image far too well. The hospital board moved quickly, suspending him pending investigation. Newspapers plastered his face across the front pages with harsh, accusatory headlines. The miracle pregnancies, doctor or devil. The fall of St. Luke's star surgeon. Pregnancy scandal shakes Harare elite. Dr. Stephen stood behind podiums, faced cameras, and gave carefully worded statements. I am innocent, he said, his voice steady. I have never harmed anyone, not ever. But the crowd had already made up its mind. In their eyes, he was no longer a healer. He was the villain of the story. After the suspension, the atmosphere inside St. Luke's shifted quietly, but unmistakably. No one said his name aloud anymore, but it lingered in every hallway, in every hushed conversation, in every nervous glance between staff. Nurses who once laughed at his jokes now whispered behind closed doors. Patients glanced at framed photos of the medical team and asked, "Is that him?" His office door stayed shut. His name tag was quietly removed from the staff board. The man who had once been the hospital's pride had become its shadow. His confidence was now seen as arrogance. His smile, once admired, was remembered with suspicion. And his absence said more than his presence ever could. But not everyone believed the accusations. Nurse Linda Nyathi, a respected senior nurse at St. Luke's, had worked alongside Dr. Stephen for 6 years. She knew he could be flirtatious, but she had never seen him cross the line. And deep down, something about the story didn't sit right with her. She met privately with Nurse Priska, her longtime friend and colleague. "You know Stephen," Linda said, lowering her voice in the break room. "Has he ever struck you as dangerous?" Priska shook her head. "Not to me, but he was too playful. And the way people see him now, it's not looking good." Linda frowned. "But these women, some of them weren't even in his ward. I checked." "You did?" Priska asked, surprised. "I looked through some of the records," Linda admitted. "He wasn't listed as attending physician for at least 3 of them." Priska leaned in. "Then who was?" Linda's eyes narrowed. "That's the thing. On paper, no one. The records are missing." Priska stared at Linda. "Missing? How can patient records just disappear?" "That's what I want to find out," Linda replied. "I've worked here too long not to notice when something doesn't add up." They spent the next 2 nights quietly going through archived shift rosters, medication charts, and surgical notes. There was a pattern hiding beneath the chaos. Most of the women who later discovered they were pregnant had been sedated, sometimes for routine procedures that didn't require sedation at all. And those sedations, they happened during night shifts. "Unusual doses," Priska muttered, flipping through one file. "Look at this. Diazepam given at twice the standard dosage." Linda nodded. "Signed off with initials that don't match any staff on record." Someone was forging records. And worse, Someone was tampering with sedated patients while the hospital slept. The pieces began to fall into place, but one major question remained. Who? One evening, as Linda walked out to her car, a young boy no older than 10 ran up to her, breathless. "My mum said I should return this," he said, holding out a wristwatch. Linda took it, confused. "Where did you find it?" "A few weeks ago, when my mum was in the hospital. I wandered out of her ward. I saw something, a nurse, doing something bad to a woman who was asleep." Linda's heart skipped. "Do you remember what the nurse looked like?" He nodded. "She was tall. She had a small scar on her neck, and she dropped that watch when she ran off." Linda looked down at the wristwatch in her hand. It had initials engraved on the back, EJ. Her blood ran cold. There was only one nurse with those initials. One nurse who fit that description exactly. Emily James. Friendly, loved, always helpful. The nurse who comforted victims, who offered tissues during interviews, who stayed late when no one else would. Emily. "No," Linda whispered. "It can't be." But deep down, the puzzle pieces began to lock into place. She didn't tell anyone. Not yet. She needed to be sure. The next morning, she placed the watch on Emily's locker shelf. Hours passed. Then Emily walked into the staff room, saw the watch, and froze. Her hand moved too quickly. Her eyes darted once before her face returned to a calm smile. "Who left this here?" she asked, slipping it into her pocket. That reaction told Linda everything she needed to know. Later that day, Priska pulled Linda aside in a quiet corridor. "I checked Emily's locker," she whispered. "Nothing obvious, no files, no charts. But something's not right." Linda nodded slowly. "I've been reviewing the shift logs. She was on duty almost every night the affected women were sedated. And the medication records." She paused. "Some of the initials don't match any registered staff." Priska frowned. "You think she forged them?" "Maybe," Linda said. "But there's no proof. Just too many things that don't add up." They agreed not to act. Not yet. Not until they were sure. But that's when the wristwatch changed everything. That morning, Emily had found it on her locker shelf, picked it up without hesitation, slid it into her pocket. She hadn't realized Linda had planted it there on purpose. Now they had their moment. No alarms, no confrontation in front of others. Just two nurses, one room, one quiet trap. In the break room, Linda sat across from her. "You picked up your watch this morning," she said gently. Emily smiled. "Yes, thank you. I thought I'd lost it." Linda's expression didn't change. "Interesting. A little boy gave that to me. Said he saw a nurse drop it while doing something to a sedated patient." Emily's smile held, but something behind her eyes flickered. "I'm sure he was mistaken." Just then, Priska stepped into the room. "We've looked into the night shifts," she said softly. "You were on duty, every time." The room fell still. There were no files, no written confession, just suspicion, a child's memory, and a watch that never should have ended up in Emily's hands. Emily didn't respond, but her silence said everything. Emily stood up slowly. The warmth in her face vanished, replaced by something cold, stripped of all pretense. "You really think you're going to stop me now?" she said quietly, almost amused. Neither Linda nor Priska spoke. Emily's tone sharpened, bitterness leaking through each word. "You think you're better than me," she said, her voice low and shaking, "with your soft hearts and your perfect little lives." She took a step forward, eyes dark with years of pain. "Do you know what it's like to live in a body that everyone else is afraid of? To be told you're a mistake before you even understand what you are? I was born with both. My parents covered it up, pretended it didn't exist. And I've lived my entire life hiding, lying, pretending." Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. "No one ever truly loved me, not for who I was, not once." Her hands clenched at her sides. "I couldn't have a child, not like everyone else." So I gave one to them. I gave them what I could never have. Linda's breath caught. Her voice came out as a whisper. You hurt them. You violated those women. Emily's voice sharpened. I gave them something real. A child. A legacy. Something they could hold on to. Something I was never allowed to dream of. Priska shook her head, eyes wide with disbelief. Her voice trembled. You blamed someone else. You ruined an innocent man. Emily laughed bitterly. The sound was cold. He was easy to blame. People already believed the worst about him. He smiled too much, talked too smooth. They didn't need proof, just an excuse. Without a word, Linda reached into her pocket and pressed a small button on her phone. Every word had been recorded. Seconds later, the break room doors flew open. Security rushed in. Emily screamed as they grabbed her. She kicked. She fought, desperate. You don't understand, she shouted. I did this for them, for all of you. You'll regret this. But it was over. Her voice was drowned out by the sound of the truth. The next morning, Zimbabwe stood still. Her name filled the headlines. Nurse behind, hospital pregnancy scandal revealed. St. Luke's betrayal. Kind nurse confesses to shocking crimes. Doctor innocent, Emily James, faces life sentence. People stared at their phones, their televisions, their newspapers, in silence. Emily James, the sweet nurse, the gentle hands, the smile that made patients feel safe. Mothers who once hugged her broke down in disbelief. Women she had comforted now couldn't speak her name without crying. Former patients stared at the screen, trying to understand how someone so kind could do something so cruel. And inside St. Luke's, the hallways were quiet. Staff avoided eye contact. No one laughed, no one smiled. The heart of the hospital had been broken from the inside. The betrayal was deep, not just because of what Emily had done, but because no one had seen it coming. She had worn kindness like a mask. She had earned trust with her voice. And while the world wasn't looking, she turned that trust into something unspeakable. It would take time, a long time, for St. Luke's to heal. Because the scars she left weren't on the skin, they were on the soul. But no one was more shocked than Dr. Stephen. He sat alone in his flat when he got the call from his lawyer. After everything, his name smeared, his license suspended, his family turning away. He could barely process the words. You've been cleared, the lawyer said gently. They found the real culprit. You're free. Free, but broken. His face had been on every front page. People had called him a monster, a predator. Even strangers on the street had spat near his feet. His name had been cursed in courtrooms and boardrooms alike. How do you come back from that? The next day, Judge Lionel sat alone in his chambers. He was supposed to be reviewing a high-profile corruption case, but his mind wasn't there. His thoughts were on Sabina, on how she'd looked the night he accused her, on how he'd walked out instead of believing her, on the fact that she had gone through the horror of a violation alone, and pregnant. He had been so quick to judge, so slow to love. That evening, he went home. Sabina was in the kitchen. She turned as he entered, but didn't say anything. I know now, Lionel said quietly. I know what happened. I know it wasn't your fault, and I'm sorry for everything. She didn't speak right away, just wiped her hands on a towel and looked down. You left me when I needed you, she finally said. I know, he replied, but I want to make things right. There was a long silence. The baby kicked inside her. She winced, resting her hand on her stomach. I don't know if I can raise this child, she whispered. I don't even know how to love him yet. You don't have to do it alone, Lionel said. She turned and looked at him then, for the first time in weeks, with eyes full of pain, but also something else, the beginning of hope. In the months that followed, things changed. Emily James was sentenced to life in prison. Her confession had been clear, her guilt undeniable. Psychological experts called her condition rare and tragic, but nothing could excuse the pain she had caused. She never once apologized to the women she'd hurt. St. Luke's Medical Center launched a full internal review. Senior staff were dismissed. Security systems were upgraded. New rules were put in place for patient protection, sedation tracking, and overnight staff oversight. Dr. Stephen was officially reinstated, but he didn't return to the hospital. Instead, he quietly opened a small clinic in Bulawayo, far from the scandal. He spent his days doing quiet work, minor surgeries, volunteer outreach, training young doctors. His charisma was gone now, but his purpose had deepened. Meanwhile, Nurse Linda Nyathi and Priska were awarded privately by the Ministry of Health for their role in uncovering the truth. No big ceremony, no cameras, just a letter of gratitude and a quiet bonus on their pay slips. But for them, that was enough. 1 year later, Sabina gave birth to a baby boy. It was a quiet, tearful delivery. No visitors, just her, the midwife, and Lionel holding her hand. The moment she held her son, something changed. He was warm, fragile, breathing, human. She didn't see the shame anymore. She saw a life, a second chance. They named him Blessing, not just because he was a blessing, but because he came at a time when they needed to remember that life held more than pain. He was proof that even after the darkness, even after the pain, the shame, and the silence, blessings could still follow. For Lionel, the road back to trust was long. He worked harder at home than he did in the courtroom. There were still moments when he struggled to bond with the boy. But each morning, when he picked him up and Blessing smiled up at him, something inside Lionel softened. They decided to leave Harare, to start over somewhere smaller, quieter, somewhere no one would whisper behind their backs. And there, in the silence of a new town, they slowly became a family again. A year after the scandal, the name St. Luke's Medical Center no longer sparked the same fear it once did. New leadership, new staff, and a series of community healing efforts had helped repair some of the broken trust. But the shadows of what had happened would never fully disappear. Inside the hospital's maternity wing, Nurse Linda walked the corridors with quiet pride. She had become a mentor to younger nurses. She spoke often about patient safety, the power of asking questions, and the cost of silence. Every now and then, she would stop outside room 213, the room where one of the affected patients had once stayed, and just stand there. Not out of sadness, but as a reminder, the truth can be buried, but if you're brave enough to keep digging, it will always find its way to the light. In Bulawayo, Dr. Stephen sat on a wooden bench outside his clinic, watching children play under a jacaranda tree. Patients passed by and waved. Some still asked for photos. Others just shook his hand quietly and said, "Thank you." He never spoke about the scandal anymore. But every time he looked in the mirror, he saw the cost of what happened, not just to him, but to the women, the families, and the trust that had been broken. He understood now that charm without integrity meant nothing, and he had learned the hard way how quickly a reputation could be used to destroy a person, guilty or not. But he had also learned something else, something deeper. Redemption isn't given. It's earned. Back in the small town, Sabina Lionel had started over. Little Blessing took his first steps in the garden. He laughed as he stumbled toward a tiny wooden ball, his mother's hands outstretched, ready to catch him. Lionel stood nearby, watching, his heart full of something he hadn't felt in a long time: peace. They had told their story only once, to a pastor who promised to keep it private. The rest of the world would never know the full truth. And that was okay. They had chosen to forgive. Not because it was easy, not because the pain had vanished, but because bitterness is a prison, and they were ready to live free. As the sun dipped low in the sky, painting everything gold, Sabina lifted Blessing into her arms and kissed his forehead. "You're not a mistake," she whispered. "You are a miracle." And in that moment, everything made sense. Let this story be a reminder that reputation is not always truth, that quick judgment can destroy innocent lives, That justice requires more than emotion. It requires evidence, patience, and courage. That people can be broken in ways you'll never understand. But being broken is never an excuse to break others. That healing is possible, but only when we choose truth over fear, love over shame, and forgiveness over vengeance. And finally, that even from the darkest roots, something beautiful can grow. A new beginning, a new purpose, a life worth protecting. Thank you so much for watching and for staying with us all the way to the end. If this story moved you, made you think, or stirred something in your heart, please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. To all our returning subscribers, thank you. Your loyalty, your support, your presence here means more than you know. You are the heartbeat of this channel, and I don't take it for granted. And if you're new here, welcome to the family. If you enjoy powerful, emotional storytelling like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you never miss a new episode. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and always remember, even in the darkest stories, there is still light.